every plan that I had going into having my first child was pretty much out the window with the first contraction.
I was visiting one of my old friends and I told her, I think I'm pregnant. And I was nervous to take a pregnancy test.
So the day that we found out, my husband basically woke me up before he goes to work. So he goes to work at like 5:30 in the morning, wakes me up at 5 and he's like, you know, just take this pregnancy test. I have a feeling.
My prevailing thought and feeling was terror. I don't want to go through with this.
I remember taking the test right before I got into the shower to go to work that day. And I read the test and I was like, oh, we're not pregnant. So I kind of put it down.
I was actually at Planned Parenthood just going through like a regular routine check and had a pregnancy test there. Not even assuming that it was going to be positive.
And he came out of the bedroom and came into the shower and he picked it up and then he went on the computer and looked at it and he's like, you're reading it upside down.
Tell me 2 lines means that I'm not pregnant.
When I pee on that stick, like as bright as day is that plus sign.
There's so many things that you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what to expect.
We told Dr. Figueroa that we wanted to have natural childbirth, and she set up an appointment with us to go to a Lamaze class.
We wanted to experience that, and I wanted to be there, through the whole experience.
And I think most of the stuff, the classes, they gave a lot of stuff when you came home. To me, anyway, that was the most interesting stuff. What do you do, like the first couple of days you come home?
We did infant care classes, and I did pregnancy yoga a lot.
What I remember about the birthing plan was that, like most, couples, we thought that we had all the answers. We'd gone to all the classes. We were ready to go. I don't think you can be necessarily prepared.
I started to feel something, but I wasn't quite sure what they were.
She was saying, I'm having this weird feeling in my stomach, or it just doesn't feel right.
We had tons of family in town, and let's see, Diala's mom was here, my parents were here, my sister was here.
Family came over, took a lot of pictures, everybody went home, we were getting ready to go to bed, and that's when this dude decided that he wanted to start coming out.
The shower was held in Harlem. I grew up in Harlem. Some of my friends were from Harlem. The whole shower was a beautiful, occasion. And at the end of the shower, my water broke.
We were actually at a restaurant when I started to have contractions with Molly.
Contractions, like, some people say they feel like their uterus is actually contracting. They can feel it in their stomach. It felt like to me like I had to go to the bathroom, like take a number 2.
It was just heavy feeling, and then comes and goes.
I'm calling my mom. I'm like, Mom, I feel like I have to go to the bathroom all the time. She's like, oh yeah, those are contractions.
Contractions started, and they became worse and worse and worse.
The pain was so overwhelming that all I wanted was to be done.
The first thing I did when I started to feel the contractions in the afternoon was I decided to go get a wax and also get my toes done. I wanted everything down there to be clean and very nice and easy to find my baby.
My best girlfriend followed me to the bathroom and she says, I think your water broke. Let's call a doctor.
Did my water break or do I have to go to the bathroom?
Oh my goodness, am I messed myself?
And I was like, no, my water broke.
I was so pregnant and so ready to give birth.
We read on the internet that there's some natural ways to induce labor, one of which is taking castor oil.
They give you all the take a bath with cod liver oil. That wasn't working, but I kept trying.
So I took the castor oil at 5. At 7 o'clock, the contractions got crazy intense.
It's 3 blocks that we have to go to get to the hospital. So we're driving 3 blocks, and like every bump I hit, she's yelling at me. She's like, stop, watch out.
I was in a lot of pain by then. I barfed all over the taxi. I barfed all over my sister's scarf.
All I'm thinking is what happens if this kid comes out in this cab. I do remember her throwing up in the, I think it was either in the cab or just as the cab door opened at the hospital. It was one of those 2.
There's a guy coming out with a wheelchair. He's pushing the lady out to get in the cab. So he looks and I'm like, excuse me, we need some help. He's like, all right, can she walk over here? I'm like, man, does she look like she can walk over there?
I was breathless with pain, literally hanging on to my husband, couldn't answer the questions that the residents were asking me.
There was like some drama about how many people I was allowed at this point before I got my room.
We're like, hey, you gotta let us upstairs, we're about to have this baby. And they're like, here's the form. Like, for them, it's just, you know, whatever, you know, 11:59 at night. Like, it's not a big deal.
My parents actually kind of like snuck in almost.
I'm just like, all right, just ignore them.
The doctor saw them and kind of just was like, okay, I see what's going on, but we're gonna let it slide, sort of thing.
Focus here. Oh my God, I'm focused. What in the world is going on here?
In those days, what they did first was give you an enema because they had to clear you of anything that you had inside of you. And remember, I was at a shower, so I had eaten, so I had quite a bit inside of me.
You can't eat within 24 hours of delivering the baby. I wish someone would have told me that.
Before I know it, the room fills up with people, like residents and pediatricians, and the pediatricians are never in the room unless there's a problem with the delivery. So I'm panicking now.
I guess I was sort of like in denial, right? Like, oh, the baby's coming, but it'll come later.
My first response was really denial, that there's no way that this is going to happen. I'm not going through with this.
Sort of like my wedding day, I would just show up and it'd be done. You know what I mean? Like everything would be done for me, and I would just have to do a couple of pushes and that would be it.
I pushed for about 5 hours with Molly and nothing happened.
7 o'clock passes, 8 o'clock passes, 9 o'clock passes, 10 o'clock passes, and I'm still pushing.
I was in labor for a total of 22 hours.
It took whole night, 24 hours.
She was my most difficult birth, and so it didn't work out as planned.
It was just a stubborn one from the beginning. It was just didn't want to come out.
I was not dilating at all.
And I can tell like the nurses are getting a little bit frustrated too because they know that it's been a long time.
After 12 hours, I still was not dilating. I had light contractions, but there was no progress being made.
I think I let out like a grunt.
She's like, ah, and like kind of screams.
And the doctor looks at me. She's like, you see all that noise? You're gonna have to stop that. None of that. And she was like, because basically you have to like conserve your energy. You can't use all your energy screaming, right? You need to use your energy to push.
See, I was under the impression that once I got to the hospital, got the epidural, it was like all gravy from there. And that definitely wasn't the case.
Once she examined me, Sheba had not turned. She was in a frank reach position. One or two things would have to happen. She would have to, insert her hands into me and try and turn her around into the right position, or I would have to have a C-section.
I felt that it was best for me to have a C-section.
I was under the impression that I was going to get a C-section because he was breech.
Once I made that decision, things went like this. It was just like all of a sudden, the doctors were having a C-section, called the anesthesiologist, and everyone's getting on the phone and the people are in and out of the room.
We decided with a conference with Teddy, myself, and her, if I wanted a C-section or should she try to bring her naturally. And of course, we wanted her to come naturally because I did not want surgery.
They said, okay, so about 7 o'clock, we're gonna wheel you into the room and at 7 p.m. and it'll be time to go. And that was at like 6 something. So I was just like, I didn't realize it was such a quick decision that once you make that decision that it's time to go.
They just said, oh, I'm just gonna do a quick sonogram real fast just to make sure that he's still breech. And sure enough, he had flipped on his own.
Felix, being a prankster, flipped back into the proper position at the last second. They were like, oh, well, looks like you're gonna, go the vaginal route now.
But I'm looking at my doctor, who I trust immensely, and his face is really calm, so I'm calm. So he's like, okay, we're gonna have to section the baby out. And I'm just like, at this point, I knew that that's not a good thing. That means she's not coming out by herself. But at that point, I'd been on the table for 5 hours, just pushing, just suck her out then.
It was 2 hours of intense pushing.
I will say this about 2 hours of pushing from the father's point of view, first-time father's point of view. And she hates it when I say this. To me, it felt like 15 minutes. Like, it was so intense.
When you experience that amount of pain, you look at who's responsible for this pain.
I've never really had like that movie moment where I'm like, ah!
And they're screaming and they hate their husband and they're punching him.
I remember grabbing his arm and really clenching it tight.
Her nails like just digging into my skin, and I was like, whoa.
Like a part of me sort of like envies the men of the 1950s who just got to sit in the waiting room and like, you know, it's a boy, pass out cigars, you know.
They tell you to put your hands behind your knees, bring your knees to your chest, bring your chest up, engage your upper abs, and then push for 10 seconds, 3 times for each contraction. That's a lot of information to be taken, like even now, but like imagine while you're in pain. Like you can't think about that, right?
Once you are in a room naked with your knees to your ears, with strangers around you, nothing else will ever embarrass you. I promise. Like it is just a defining moment in modesty.
As soon as she's out, I feel just immense relief.
My first reaction, I just smiled and I went, hi.
I didn't have that initial moment where I was like, oh, my baby. You know, I was just more like, oh, okay.
All of that pain for 13 hours was now ended.
She's pushing and pushing and pushing. And then that's it. And she's here.
And everything else just kind of, you know, the background just kind of went away for a second.
And she just was so radiant to me at that time. I just exclaimed how that she's beautiful, you know.
When a baby comes out, they're like beautiful. They're like the most beautiful thing in the world, except they're covered with this white pasty stuff. And like you're like, oh, it's gross.
The process of birth, it smells, you know? Not the greatest smell on the planet.
But it doesn't stop you. It's like you're kissing the baby, you're like, oh, the baby's so great. And like you're getting this white stuff all over your face. And like both of us are like the happiest people in the world.
I was just in such an elated state when I actually held her in my arms. It was like nirvana.
You know, birth is such a beautiful thing if you see it, you know, from that stage.
But what was really special, and Diallo will probably kill me for this, but when, you know, Felix came out crying and stuff, Diallo also was crying, and so that for me was like really touching.
But yeah, I definitely cried, you know. I even think I had on this sweater. I think I might have had on this exact same outfit. I cried.
After the background came back in and all the noise came back in, then it clued back in, then yeah, it's time to be, it's responsibility time.
We all sort of prepare and try to be ready for the day of the birth. But in reality, the hard stuff is when you get back from the hospital.
We thought that we were more able to handle a newborn than we would actually see over the next few days at home. And it's inevitable.
They're so small and delicate, and I've never really held a baby before.
You know, they don't send a nurse home with you, and they really should. They really, really should.
One of the first times Felix opened his eyes, he like looked at me and looked at Brittany, and then the scowl came over his face. He was like, he knows we're amateurs.
And like I look at her, and like she's looking at me, and she's like, her eyes are closed, and she's opening them up a little bit. And she like holds my hand, and you know, like everything in your life changes. Every single thing.
Somebody said it's the least exclusive fraternity in the world, but doesn't make membership any less special.
It's a oneness that you feel with God because it's an amazing thing that you have now given birth. I just felt like, wow, I just played my part in that. And here's my little child, and I was excited.
You know I can't recall the day your dream became my life. I've lived an eternity with you by my side. You by my side. Like the sun and the moon I've seen, that your light reflects mine. And riding together we have conquered the skies. But for so long I failed to see the truth as I searched for a fantasy that lived within you. Said, how did you know that you'd be my angel when your wings were trapped into my heart? Where did you see